Dialectical behavior therapy was created in the 1980s by Marsha Linehan in Seattle, Washington.
Today, DBT is taught all over the world.
We're two therapists who believe everyone can benefit from DBT skills.
I'm Kate.
I'm Michelle.
And this is DBT and Me. Hello, everyone, and welcome to monthly episode number 4. I don't know why I'm making hand gestures. I will never grow out of the fact that I'm making hand gestures as though anybody other than Michelle can see them. Anyway, since you guys can't see me holding up 4 fingers, I will say it is our 4th monthly episode.
Yes, our 4th time doing this once a month.
I know. Right? Other than Q&As.
Other than Q&As,
That's the thing.
yes.
Other than Q&As. So, what we are talking about today is kind of some coping skills for coming out of COVID. Before we get too into that, I do want to acknowledge that, we've said this before, Michelle and I are both in America, and so we have a certain status of things that are kind of coming here, and so as a country, we're getting close-ish to kind of emerging from this, right? We've got a lot of vaccinations distributed and given. We're getting more all the time, right? There's kind of a light at the end of the tunnel for us. And for not all, but many other more wealthy countries across the globe. On the other hand, a lot of wealthy countries across the globe are kind of hoarding those vaccines. And so the distribution is not being done with equality. And so we want to acknowledge that this episode might not be relevant to some of you right now. Mm-hmm. My intense hope is that this is relevant for all of you eventually. The wealthy countries will stop hoarding all of their shit, and it will actually get more equitably distributed, so that the rest of the globe can join us in seeing the light at the end of this tunnel. So, really, this episode, we kind of divided it into the top 4 concerns that Michelle and I have heard from our clients and friends and family too, if I'm being honest. Not just our clients.
Things that we feel ourselves.
I was going to say myself. Yeah. Right? So that's sort of how we've broken it down, trying to find the different DBT skills that we thought would be the most applicable to each of those sort of 4 categories of concerns. And so we'll launch into that in a second, but I do want to just make thoroughly sure that we're acknowledging a lot of you are in places where the light is not showing yet at the end of that tunnel. And I'm real fucking sorry about that. It makes me sad. So, yeah, I guess that's it. That's sort of a weird ... ending to the introduction, but that's where we are. And, but hopefully keep this episode in your back pocket. And when the light at the end of the tunnel shows up for you, go ahead and give it a listen again.
Exactly. Yeah, and these might be things, even if that light at the tunnel is still really far off for you, these might be things that you've been thinking about for a while. Yes. I mean, some of these things that we're going to be talking about today, I was thinking about some of these things months ago. Specifically, the first one that I'm going to talk about, of just like, how is that going to feel when we can do this again safely? How is that going to be?
Yep.
So yeah,
go for it, Michelle.
I know, yeah, I'm going to dive in. So, right, like Kate said, we broke this up into 4 different categories, and the first one that I'm going to be talking about is basically when you feel like you have really forgotten / or not feeling so adept at socializing with other people anymore. We are out of practice with this.
Yes.
More than a year into this pandemic, and different people, right? Everybody's situation is so unique and so different. And maybe you feel like your social interactions haven't changed that much, or you've kept up with socializing with people in a way that's felt safe to you. And other people may be like, yep, have not really left my house except to go to the grocery store. And that's it.
Alone.
Yep. Yeah, and I live alone, right? So everybody's going to be in different spots with this. But generally speaking, I would say for the vast majority of us, our social lives took a big turn when COVID hit.
And not everybody felt
things.
as adept at socializing before COVID.
Yeah.
And so if you felt a little awkward in this realm to begin with,
Yep.
COVID probably hasn't helped.
Yeah. One of my friends posted a meme. I'm probably going to get it wrong here with exactly what it said, but it was basically like, I was already really introverted before COVID, and now I just feel like a feral animal that's just going to growl at people to stay away if anyone comes too close or something like that.
Yep. I feel it.
Yeah, so, right, you could be in various places with this. Some people may be chomping at the bit to get back to social interaction, but still may have a lot of worries around how to do that safely, which we're going to be talking about, I guess, in my second topic, the third one, a little bit, maybe. Like, they're ready, right? Ready to get back to socializing, and other people may be feeling more cautious about it, even if you want to, again, just because we're out of practice with this. So there, basically for each of these, actually, for each category, we've thought of 3 skills. So basically the 3 top DBT skills that we think could be helpful with this. And one of them that we thought about for if you're having a lot of trepidation or anxiety about re-entering the social world again in some way, give maybe a really helpful interpersonal effectiveness skill to rely on. I will say this with a lot of confidence. You are not alone with feeling anxious about this. Kate's nodding. I'm nodding. You're not alone. One of the things that for me personally has come up, I think especially because I am more of an introvert, is there would be some social interactions or social settings that would feel draining pre-COVID for me. The thought of doing those things again now, when I haven't seen most of my friends in a year, just sounds far worse than it did before. Like, I can't imagine going to a gathering of like 20 people and enjoying myself. Like, I just can't, because what was the last time I did that? Right? It's been a long time. It's ironic because the last social event I truly attended, like the last social event I would say, was Kate's birthday party.
I was going to say, I'm pretty sure I know the answer to that.
Yeah, and I don't think there were 20 people there. So I don't remember the last time I was in like a true gathering setting. I've had little social interactions here and there with 1 or 2 people, but being in like a group, I can't remember. So the reason why we put in give here is because the way that you're feeling is valid and understandable if some of those things are leading you to worry. And because other people may be feeling the same way as you, really be practicing give with yourself and give with others in your life. A lot of people, well, some people might be really open and honest about their struggles with this, of like, you know, kind of like that meme that I said, of just being like, yeah, not so sure how it's going to feel to get back to socializing after COVID. Not quite sure if I'm ready for that. It sounds pretty overwhelming to me. Some people might be really open and honest about that. Other people either might not be in that space, or they might struggle to be open about that. And if you have other friends or people in your life that maybe also are feeling kind of overwhelmed or anxious about this, practice give with them. This is a pretty universal experience right now. I did see one of my friends. She's fully vaccinated. I'm fully vaccinated. She lives by herself. And we spent time together without masks. But I told her, I was like, you're going to be the first person right outside the members of my household that I've been around without a mask. I'm a little worried about it. Like, it feels strange to me. Mm-hmm. And she really validated me. So be that person for yourself and for others in your life as we're all adjusting to this. So give may be important. Also, I think a big thing that will be helpful if social events are bringing up feelings of anxiety for you is to think about if there are activities you could do with other people when it's safe to do so that might help ease that anxiety. So thinking about some pleasant events and activities that you enjoy. For example, maybe you love hiking. That might be a better first kind of social event with a friend for you than it might be to, I don't know, go watch a movie
out in their
together.
Apartments, yeah.
Yeah, right. Like, just depending on what fits for you, what you enjoy, what they enjoy, and what feels comfortable and enjoyable to both of you. Because when we're doing something that we enjoy, that's going to hopefully naturally ease that anxiety a little bit. So having that as sort of the backdrop to the social interaction might help the social interaction feel easier when it does happen, is to just do something that you both might enjoy. So that could be something to think about. And the third thing that we thought about is that if you are around somebody and you're socializing with them and those feelings of anxiety are really coming up in the moment, again, maybe before you made these plans with someone, you were like, I'm so excited. I'm not feeling anxious. I'm just feeling so ready to see this person again. I've missed them. This will be great. I've been waiting for this. You know, you're maybe not feeling too worried or scared about how this might go. And then let's say you get there and that's when the anxiety hits you. Or maybe you're already feeling anxious beforehand, and then when you're actually in the social interaction, the anxiety ramps up even more about just being in a social setting again. Stop may be a really helpful skill to use. Stop is so versatile. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it was honestly kind of originally designed for, like, if you are sensing that you might engage in, right, like what DBT calls a problem behavior, you can use stop to stop yourself from saying or doing that thing that might be hurtful to you or other people around you. But I actually think stop is great for anxiety. I really think it can help to just, take that step back, observe what's going on for yourself, and then proceed mindfully from there. And that proceed mindfully might be saying, I've reached my max. Maybe this was too much for me. Maybe I'm not ready for this yet, because the other thing that we didn't add in here, but I'll say it's important, even if it doesn't particularly relate to any DBT skills, take baby steps. Mm-hmm. Take baby steps with returning to social interaction as it is safe and allowed and comfortable for you to do so wherever you are in the world. Start small. Again, there's a reason why my first social event that I did was one-on-one with my friend and not in a group of 20 people. Nope. I'm not ready for that. For me, for myself. I'm just not. Again, that's nothing for me that would have made me feel anxious pre-COVID, but we're in a different world now. So, if you are in the middle of an event and if you're getting overwhelmed, I say this all the time, a great way to practice stop is to take a bathroom break. Remove yourself, step out of the room, say, I need to go use the bathroom, go take a moment to yourself, and then decide what you want to do from there with how you're feeling. You might decide to leave. You might feel better after you take that moment and decide to stay. Whatever it is okay, but I think stop can be a really helpful, handy thing to have in your back pocket for when you are at a social event, whenever that may be for you. Because, I've said it a few times. I'm going to keep saying it because it's the truth. Like, we're just out of practice. We are. This is not going to feel as simple or easy or natural as it did before COVID because we just haven't done this in a while. So those are some things we recommend, is to practice give with yourself and the other people in your life, because lots of people feel this anxiety about interacting socially again with the people that they love. Try to see if you can do a pleasant event that you enjoy and the other person or people that you're with might enjoy to ease that anxiety, and practice stop if you need to when you're with others. Any thoughts, Kate? Anything you want to add on or that came up for you?
Sorry for the loud chair adjustments. I forgot to say this in the intro, by the way, but I am at my sister's house, and so I am actually sitting at my nephew's computer desk, and he has the world's squeakiest leather computer chair. And so I feel like I can't move half an inch without like anyway, so I apologize for that in the background of this episode. Let's love it. Michelle, despite the fact that we consistently joke that we have the same brain, I also love how different our brains are.
Yeah.
Because we're both like, yes, these skills. I was like, yes, these skills. And I'm like, oh, that's a different angle on them that I was
Oh, yeah? I'd love to hear your angle, though, if you want to.
I mean, it's just like, it's not like huge. It's not like 180. It's more like, 5 degrees. Which is with give. I was thinking of it as just, I don't know. I mean, it's not technically structured. It's not like other things like Dear Man or other stuff that's really super structured in step. But like, okay, I've forgotten how to people. Give is a good way to people. If I remember,
give is
to
the
be
building
gentle,
blocks.
if I just move in a give way through my social interactions, the whole point is to help it nurture or form connections, right? That's the purpose of the skill on average. So I was like, if you remember nothing else, just chant give to yourself in your head to remember, like, okay, nothing else, I can do this. That's the way to do it. So I think it's lovely. I love the idea of it being able to, like, using specifically the validating part of it to really make those connections with others, like you were talking about. Like the universality of these experiences. It's different and lovely. I love how you thought about that. More applicable specifically to the anxiety part of it. And then pleasant events, basically the same thing, which is just so many people find it easier to socialize when there's a shared activity.
Yeah.
Right? When it's not just the two of you, blinking at each other across an open, silent space. You're like, I don't know what to talk about, but if I'm hiking, I can be like, look at that tree. Isn't that a pretty flower? Oh, this hill is hard, right? Like it gives you a shared experience to relate about if you've forgotten perhaps how to relate to people. I don't have anything to add to that. That's exactly what I was thinking, but because it's just, I don't know, maybe in part also because I know an awful lot of people, including the ex-partner of mine, Charlie, who I talk about a lot here, socializing was not ever his primary strength in the world, and so I know a lot of people are like, this wasn't good to start with. So anyway, I love it. Those are good. All right, are we on to my
first
one? Mm-hmm. Okay. So, in true me form, when I was thinking about these sort of subject headings, the way I phrased this one is, I'm fucking scared to re-enter the world. Right? There's a lot of people, myself included to some extent, there are certainly people who are suffering from this more than I am, but who are, I don't know, have gotten used to being scared.
Yeah.
Right? There were real, legitimate reasons to be scared of going out into the world, right? There was this inherent risk, right? Even if you did everything right, even the people around you were ideally doing everything right. I don't know about you, but I haven't gone out in public in the last year and ever seen everyone doing it all right. So, but there's always this risk of this illness that also could be like mild to death, right? Which is just so much uncertainty, so much being unknown, and so much real risk to yourself and possibly to your loved ones if you live with other people or were around other people. And so our brains and our bodies have just kind of gotten used to that setting. And I know a lot of people who are, on the one hand, sort of intellectually really excited about or looking forward to getting back out there, doing the normal stuff again, etc. But their emotions are just kind of going nutter butters about it. Because that's what it's been trained to do for the last year, right? Our nervous system, our brains, where'd my brain go? Amygdala has been on, high alert for a year or more, right? Depending on where you are in the world. That's hard to turn off. My favorite example personally, for myself recently was I'm 5 days from being considered fully vaccinated, right? I've already had my second shot and, I'm just waiting 5 days until the 2 weeks is up. And I was thinking about the idea of going out and eating in a restaurant. And I'm going to have to do some of these things I'm about to talk about before I can do that again. Eating out was one of my, primary pleasures in life before all this started. I love going to restaurants. I'll admit, I am very willing to hurt my wallet to go eat really fancy food. I love it so much. And even thinking about it, my heart starts to go faster. I feel my muscles get a little bit clenchy. So I'm like, I'm sorry, are you saying be in a small enclosed environment with a bunch of people who don't have masks on? Right? My logical brain goes, Kate.
You're fully vaccinated.
You're fully vaccinated.
Okay. Yeah.
You're safe.
And my body goes, here probably are too, because at least here in Washington State, well,
yes.
I mean, now many places people can get vaccinated if you're an adult, but yeah, they've been eligible for a little bit to get vaccinated. So.
Yes, but my feelings, my body is like, fuck you, brain, you don't know what you're talking about. I will keep us safe by making her panic, right? It's hard. So I think a lot of, maybe this whole episode is going to be Michelle and I validating a lot of how the different flavors of how, despite the fact that we've all been looking forward to this, it's also really hard. Because we get good at what we practice. And for the last year, we've been practicing being alone and scared. And so that's what we've gotten good at. So the three skills that I thought about, first and foremost, honestly, is cope ahead, right? If I'm getting this anxious just thinking about going out and eating at a restaurant, it's probably a really good idea for me to more intentionally and consciously imagine going out and eating at a restaurant and walk myself through it in my mind in such a way that I can be like, all right, how will I behave? What will it look like? How will I manage my emotions in that moment? What will I do if I become overwhelmed? Right. And just intentionally go through that imaginative process rather than, dipping my toe in the thought, getting scared and running away. Right. It's going to be much more useful to help me face and then work through and lower my anxiety if I can, work with cope ahead. It's its entire purpose, really. Is you there's something stressful coming up, and as we were just saying, you get better at what you practice, and it turns out thinking counts as a way of practicing. So if I can take some time before I first decide to venture into a restaurant to just picture it and go through it, and just go through it again and again in my mind with it going really well, pairing this with relaxation techniques the whole time. I mean, it's part of the cope ahead skill, but in case you forgot, make sure you're relaxing at the end of it, right? Make sure you're finding a way to help bring your physiological arousal back down again, right? But going through that process is really likely to help make the actual event much more pleasant for me than if I just sort of ostriched my way up to walking into the restaurant and then was like, oh shit, I don't even know what to do now. So, cope ahead is definitely the one that I would lean on the most myself, personally. The second one is very similar. I think, I don't know, Michelle, you tell me if you disagree with me, but honestly, I think these two skills are two of the most similar to each other skills in all of DBT.
Yeah, cope ahead and effective rethinking and paired relaxation are very similar, and I guess it just kind of depends on picking whichever one feels like a better fit for you.
Exactly.
I don't know. I personally really think with the restaurant example that you're giving, effective rethinking, I actually think would really be a good fit for that because you're doing that breathing in.
Your ineffective thoughts, so I don't know what, something like, I can't handle this, or this is too scary to do, or something, right?
No, we haven't taught this skill in a while, folks.
This is wonderful. I was going to say, look at us proving that you can be teaching this shit for years and still have to take a second to remember it.
I think it's breathing in an effective thought and then breathing out so relax. Right?
Relax. That's right. You just have to you look at your ineffective thought and find something to replace it with. That's right.
Yeah. And you practice that, ideally daily leading up to the thing you're going to do. So if, let's say, you've made plans to go to a restaurant in a week, or that's kind of the day that you've picked to go, that's one you can practice almost every day. So then hopefully when you're there, and you've really imagined it, especially if it's a restaurant you're familiar with, then you've really created this scene and you've practiced that enough that your body will hopefully just kind of do it naturally. So yeah, they're both very effective, and I think the effective rethinking and paired relaxation
is what you'd go for. See, we're demonstrating the differences. Yeah, I've just always liked, and no, do I have a particular reason? I can't even think of one. I've just always liked Copenhagen better.
Yeah, fair enough.
But I can absolutely see what you're talking about, Michelle, because it does, I was talking a lot about how my physiology was sort of taking over, instead of my rational thoughts. And so I definitely see your point, Michelle, about how effective rethinking more explicitly works on bringing down your physiological arousal. And instead of associating that thought with panicking, you can start to associate thoughts around that event with
yeah, exactly.
With relaxing, with letting go. Cope ahead, and effective rethinking with paired relaxation. And I don't know, I almost feel like the last one, to an extent, might be necessary even with the first two, which is opposite action, right? Even if I do the cope ahead every day, even if I do the effective rethinking and paired relaxation every day, depending on how strong my fear was or is, there might still be a varying amount of it left when it comes time to actually do the thing. And so having prepared myself as best as possible, having, listened to the more reasonable mind side of, my being, I might have to go, okay, I know this is okay. So despite the fact that I'm afraid, I'm going to do opposite action to fear. And I'm going to approach the thing that is scaring me. And so, yeah, I almost think you could pair that with whatever skills you thought were useful here. I think there's a strong chance that we're all going to be having to practice a whole lot of opposite action in the coming months as we kind of try and re-enter the world, right? For Michelle, with you talking about social events, at some point you might have to be like, all right, I'm going to have to figure this out. I'm not never going to a party again in my life. So at some point I just gotta do it. Right. And same thing, right? For me, going out to, I don't know what, small enclosed spaces. That was the thing I think that ended up latching in my brain with COVID as being the most fear inducing. So I'm going to have to opposite action to get myself through that the first, 1 to 10 times ish, maybe that I do it. I do want to say that may very well, it might be one and done. It may also not be one and done. You may have to do opposite action the first few times you try and re-engage in an activity that you haven't been doing for the last year. So don't think that it doesn't work. Just if you're like, all right, I opposite actioned my way into a restaurant, and the next week I go to a restaurant, I'm still scared. I guess opposite action was useless. Some things take repetition. Remember, you've been practicing for a year. How you're feeling right now, it might take more than one go to shift away from that again. It's not going to take a whole year. That I pretty much promise you. I don't think it's not going to take as long as COVID was for you to get more comfortable again, sort of return to your baseline, but it's probably going to be more than once, would be my guess. So yeah, those are the three things I think of: cope ahead, effective rethinking, and paired relaxation, and opposite action. What about you, Michelle? What are your thoughts? Any additions?
Yeah, well, I just had something come up with the opposite action piece, which is like you were saying, and I 100% agree that you may have to practice opposite action more than once before you start really feeling more comfortable. And I think it's also something that can be helpful, again, maybe really bringing in some mindfulness here, actually, is that if, let's say, you go to a restaurant, you maybe feel fine, right? Overall, maybe you're not as anxious as you expected you would feel. Okay, that went okay. You go to a restaurant again a couple weeks later, and it's like, now I'm feeling more elevated, right? Let's get curious about just why that is. What makes this experience different from the last one? Is this restaurant more crowded? That maybe last time you went in and there was nobody sitting anywhere near you, so you felt quite a bit better. Was it something, within yourself of like, oh, well, I didn't get very good sleep last night or whatever it is, but to just kind of, I think, be really curious about noticing, okay, when I'm acting opposite to the thing that I'm initially afraid of, just noticing what does that do for my fear? What seems to raise the fear? What seems to lower the fear? And kind of with what I said in the first part, Kate and I are not recommending like taking a plunge into the deep end of the pool. If you're not ready to do so, start small. And you can continue to do opposite action, even if you're like, ooh, going to this restaurant or at this time of day was too much for me. You don't have to throw out the baby with the bathwater. And you were getting at this actually really nicely, Kate. Doesn't mean you never go to a restaurant again. But just okay, because I kind of noticed what about that situation maybe really brought up the fear. How do I continue acting opposite? I just see if maybe I can make mindful choices about how this can feel more approachable for me than maybe this other situation did.
It's like my last little note. I know it's time to go on to yours, but you saying all of that made me think of another thing.
Yeah.
Opposite action, which is, for a lot of places, there's on the cusp of being ready and able to do all this stuff. Mm-hmm. So for a while, you might have to actually practice opposite action to, I guess, what would emotion would it be? Like eagerness or something, right? You might have to, for a while, practice opposite action to keeping yourself from plunging headlong into things before either, it's safe or you're ready, right? So balance is key.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Right? And so pay attention to what your urges / feelings are and bring in, try and get into that wise mind place to be like, all right, here's my feelings, urges, etc. Here's what I know rationally, reasonably. Here's sort of the facts. When I bring those two together, when I synthesize that, is this I ought to do the thing even though it frightens me? Or is it, I ought to not do that even though I want to?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because we're on this weird teeter-tottery edge right now about a lot of things. Mm-hmm. So you might find that for different situations and different things, you end up having to practice opposite action in opposite directions.
Yeah, definitely, right? I went too far one way, or, I ventured out too far, pushed myself too far, or I'm not pushing myself enough.
Yeah.
It can really go either way. Definitely. Okay, so my third topic I feel like is so broad. I'm trying to think of how to summarize it, because there's a lot of different components here. But I think if we really build off of the first two things that Kate and I have talked about, one is really having anxiety about socializing with other people or just feeling really out of practice with that. The second thing that Kate was just talking about is having anxiety about just going out places and feeling scared to do some of the things that you used to do pre-COVID. And this third thing basically relates to how do you set boundaries around this? Like with other people in your life. And a lot of this boundary setting, when Kate and I were preparing for this episode, we do feel like there is this component of it that does come down to vaccinations, right? So more and more people are getting vaccinated in this country every single day. And I remember when I got vaccinated, I just had this gigantic question mark of, now what?
Now what? Yep, that's what I was going to say.
Okay, so I'm vaccinated, right? And many of the vaccines are two doses, right? Or 2 out of the 3 that we have currently. So, okay, I've only got my first dose, so I think I really can't consider doing anything until after I get my second dose. Okay, I'm vaccinated. People in my household are not yet. A lot of people I know aren't vaccinated yet. What do I do with this? Now that I'm a vaccinated person, right? What do I feel comfortable doing again? Would I feel comfortable going out to a restaurant like we were just talking about? Or do I still not feel comfortable with that? It was this very strange thing that I will be honest, I am still very much in. Even though I'm now fully vaccinated, of like, okay, being a vaccinated person in this world, how does this change things for me and my boundaries? I think a lot of us, for a long time, for very good reason, we had very black and white boundaries. And depending on where you were in the country or in the world, some of those boundaries were put in place for you. guess what? You cannot go to a movie theater, a restaurant, a gym. The list goes on and on. So now that those restrictions are being lifted in many areas, what do I feel comfortable with? And what do people I love feel comfortable with or not comfortable with? And how do I negotiate where I'm going to go, who I'm going to socialize with? How do I navigate this? That's what we kind of wanted the third thing to be about, is once you do determine your boundaries, how do you communicate those to other people? So I also want to say, Kate and I are not medical professionals. We're mental health providers, but we are not doctors. And so I don't want to, get too up on a high horse about the right or wrong choices, right? Listen to the CDC. Don't listen to us. Listen to the CDC. However, what I will say is that different people make different choices, right? There may be people listening to this who are vaccinated, people who have no plans to be vaccinated, even when it's available to them. You may have everyone in your life already vaccinated around you, or you may be like, yep, I'm vaccinated, but the people I know and I'm close to, they don't want to get vaccinated. So even though, Kate and I were explicit about it, we are both vaccinated, and I'll be honest, I would encourage you to get vaccinated and consult with your healthcare provider if you have any concerns about that. Everyone's in a different boat with this one too, just in terms of what's going to feel safe and comfortable to you with the people that you know in your life and the decisions that they are making, which we can't control other people's choices. We can only control our own. So navigating these boundaries as we move into a vaccinated world gets interesting and challenging, I think, in some ways. I know I had to set a boundary with a friend recently. I'll just give a personal example of this before I go into some of the skills that might be helpful here. I have a friend who, even though I am fully vaccinated, my husband was not at the time. My husband's actually getting his first dose tomorrow, which I'm very excited about. But basically, so there's me, I'm a fully vaccinated person, my husband who was not, and then a friend of ours who was not vaccinated either, who really wanted to meet up with us. And this friend was very explicit about their decision to not wear a mask around close friends and family members. And I hold a very different view. I think it's really important to wear masks, especially when we're in close contact socializing with people. So we held different views, and basically we had an open conversation about this, and I had to kind of decide, well, what do I feel comfortable with? Knowing that this person is not vaccinated, doesn't want to wear a mask around me, what do I feel comfortable with and what do I feel uncomfortable with? And I basically realized for myself, and again, I'm not here to say this is right or wrong. Make your own personal decisions how you see fit. But I made the decision that I would not feel comfortable seeing him indoors without a mask. I would only feel comfortable seeing him outside at a park. And I also wanted to wear a mask when seeing him, and my husband wanted to wear a mask as well. So basically I told him, this is what we feel comfortable with, is to see you outside at a park, and we will be wearing masks. And we were able to negotiate this so that I felt safe during that interaction. And I was able to kind of say what some of my boundaries were. But different people have different boundaries. And so it can be really tricky to navigate, especially once you get vaccinated, if that's something you're going to do. Hey, I really want to see this person, or I really want to see these other people in my life. But is this best, that kind of a thing. So it's not as simple as it might seem at first glance to make these decisions of where do I go and what do I do, especially as more and more people do get vaccinated and things open up more and more. Just how do I navigate this, especially with people in my life who might have differing views than I do. So, all of that is to say, the three skills that we came up with here, I mean, the first one that came readily to mind for both of us of like, yes, this one, of course, no matter what, is fast. So being fair to yourself and the other person, not apologizing for what your boundaries are, sticking to your values around like what feels safe and comfortable for you, and being truthful. That all of those components are going to be really important when you are having these types of conversations with people around boundaries. I certainly had to have these conversations earlier on with things with COVID too, long before the vaccine came out. My mom, bless her heart, but my mom's like, you can come over and we'll sit on different couches 6 feet apart and it'll be fine. And, that kind of a thing. And I was like, the only way, she wanted to feed me lunch. And I'm like, the only way I'm going to feel comfortable with that is if I have my mask on the whole time. And if you do too, I don't feel comfortable taking off my mask to eat food indoors with you. That's not going to feel comfortable to me. And I think I've been really fortunate that the people in my life have been able to respect the personal boundaries that I hold. But you may find yourself having to use some fast here with different people in your life if you haven't already. I hear this a lot with clients of just, again, people have various levels of risk around COVID, and lots of my clients have had to tell their loved ones, no, I'm not going to come do that thing with you. I'm not going to come over to your house. I'm not going to come to your child's birthday party. It doesn't feel safe to me, right? And how do we do this in a fast sort of way? So that's really important to consider. And the other thing, which honestly, this kind of relates to like what you were saying in your section, Kate, about how cope ahead and effective rethinking, like kind of same idea, different flavors.
Yeah.
Sort of the same thing here as well, right? You have fast. And then if you also want to, you can use some Dear Man. Dear Man really gives a lot of structure for what it might look like to set these boundaries with people, right? Describing in a really objective way, expressing your emotions, asserting what you would like, and reinforcing how that might be best for you and the other person, kind of a thing. And how to be mindful, confident, and negotiate, right, if needed. So Dear Man really can walk you through how it might look to set these boundaries and give you some framework and some structure of how to do it if you feel like that's something that you're looking for. And again, different people hold different boundaries. I know lots of people who have been traveling more recently. And there are also a lot of people who are like, nope, you couldn't pay me enough to get on a plane. I don't care if I'm vaccinated. You can't pay me enough to get on a plane at this point. Just everyone's different. So really being able to clearly articulate what your boundaries are and why you have them, Dear Man can really help you with that. So fast, Dear Man, pick one, use both, all of that. So both of those I think could be really helpful. And finally, just especially if you're sitting here and you're just kind of like, man, I don't really know exactly what my boundaries are at this point. Again, my COVID boundaries have certainly changed over the course of this pandemic. What they were a year ago is not what they are today, because we're in a different spot now in terms of cases. There have been times where my boundaries, I was okay seeing clients in person in my office with masks. And then there were times where I did not feel comfortable doing that, as another example of a boundary. But if you're wondering to yourself now, oh, I don't really know what my boundaries are, kind of a thing. Mm-hmm. I would also say, even though this is the third out of three that I'm talking about, this may arguably be the first one to go to here, which is just checking in with your wise mind, right? And letting that be your guide on what boundaries are going to feel best to you. And, right, we have this emotional side to us that might be like, oh my God, I really want to see that person. I'm tired of COVID. It's been
just
too long.
Just because you're done with COVID doesn't mean that COVID's done, right?
Unfortunately. Yep. So you may have that side that's just really pulling you to be like, yes, I'm dying to take that trip. I want to go. And then there's probably this reasonable side, right? That might honestly, I don't know, depending on how far it goes, could go down a very extreme rabbit hole of maybe looking at information that may or may not be applicable to you and that kind of a thing. But it really is this juggling act and this balance of what does the science say? What does the research say? Again, trust and go to the CDC's website. That's the main source of information for what is currently recommended and not recommended with where we're at right now with things. And try to make a decision that really takes into account your health and well-being and the well-being and health of those around you who you love, and that you can feel confident communicating about, and to not feel a sense of shame or to feel bad if your COVID boundaries are maybe stricter than other people's. You may be surrounded by people who are like, oh yeah, like all the people I know go and see their friends and they don't wear masks and they do whatever they want to do, but like, I'm not doing that. Well, it's nothing to feel ashamed about. It's nothing to apologize for, whatever your decisions are. Or you might be taking more risks than people around you and questioning, hey, I still know lots of people who aren't going anywhere besides the grocery store, but I'm starting to see some more people and I'm trying to do it safely, but like, am I doing the right thing? Listen to your wise mind. And see what that has to show and tell you about what your boundaries are for different situations. Okay, I'm done. I talked a lot about that one. It felt like a really, really big one of like just determining and communicating our boundaries. That's hard.
It is hard.
What are your thoughts, Kate?
I was thinking while you were talking, I was like, I don't have anything to add. I don't think. I always feel weird about it. I'm sure I was paying attention, but no, I think you covered it more or less.
Good.
Off the top of my head, I can't think of anything that you didn't cover. I just love that you really emphasized that everybody's going to be unique in where they are with their boundaries, and that to try and really make sure that you understand that that's okay. Right? I think with the fair, right? Mm-hmm. Like, it's okay if you and another person have different boundaries. Neither one of you has to be wrong or bad or whatever, right? Yeah. Just those are yours and these are mine.
Yep.
We don't agree. How can we figure this out?
Yeah. Well, and I just thought of an example there as you were saying it because, thankfully, right, we have technology and we have these ways to do things that, really can create more opportunities for us. So like I had a client recently, this client has had some pretty strict COVID boundaries. And their mother reached out to them and basically was like, hey, I really want to see you. Like, could we go to coffee? And my client just very clearly said, no, but I'd love to do a Zoom call with you. Like, we can still see each other, right? If you don't want to go to your friend's child's birthday party, be like, I don't feel comfortable with that, but hey, can I drop the present off on your porch later? Or I would maybe feel comfortable seeing just you guys, but I don't feel comfortable in a party setting, or like whatever it might be, of just really figuring out how could we still maintain this connection and it doesn't violate boundaries for me.
Yeah, I love that. I think I'm sure we talked about this when we did the first episode we did about COVID back when it was just sort of spinning up in the world. But one of my best examples is you and I. Since COVID hit, I haven't seen a client in person at all. Yep. I don't even have an office space anymore. The group I was with got out of the lease because we're like, well, that's not happening for a while. I don't want to pay $500 for a space I'm not going to use for a year. And so Michelle and I just had different risk thresholds, and that's fine, right? Well, I wasn't like, oh, Michelle,
how dare you see your clients in person? Yeah, right?
Right? And Michelle similarly wasn't like, Kate, don't you think you owe it to your clients to see them in person?
You're just being way too overly cautious.
Right? Like there's room. A lot of us, it makes a lot of sense to struggle with this, right? It can be hard to validate our own stances without feeling like that inherently invalidates others, right? Sometimes we can put down other people's choices, decisions, or boundaries as a way of kind of confirming or validating our own. it's really okay if they're different. Michelle seeing clients in person doesn't do anything to me. Like, it's a whole different thing if, like, she just burst in the front door of my house maskless one day. Then our different boundaries, we'd have to have a different talk, right? But, like, you don't have to bring someone down to lift yourself up, right? Your opinions, your boundaries, etc., can be perfectly valid, and have that mean nothing about the validity of anybody else's.
Yeah.
You know, good or bad. So
Yep.
I think that can be really helpful to remember. And you and I on this particular issue is one of my favorite ways of talking about that.
Yeah, I feel like we've had great communication around it, even just before the call today, right? Because you're 5 days away from being fully vaccinated.
Yes.
And I would love to see you in person, but, you know, checking in of like, what, you know, does that feel comfortable for you? And like, what about, you know, your husband? And
Yep.
yeah, how is he going to feel about this? And, you know, just really wanted to make sure that it's going to feel comfortable to everybody. And if it doesn't feel comfortable to everybody, well, then what do we continue to do and adapt to instead?
Awesome. All right.
Cool.
On to the last one, I think.
Last one, yes.
So this one, as a heading, we were talking about, like, what to try to keep from COVID. But it's I don't know, it's pretty nuanced. And I was going
to say, I think we need to explain what we mean.
Yeah, no, so, I don't know. I'll start with an anecdote for me personally, and then try and expand that to the topic. As I just mentioned, I haven't had an office space for over a year now. And so my house has been my office space. My commute is nothing. is walking across the hall from my bedroom to my guest bedroom, right? Like, there's just no commute. And so I have filled the time that used to be taken up by my commute to and from work, because I had a bit of one. I did not live very close to my office. And I have filled that time with self-care for the last year. Like, I wake up 3 hours before work on any given morning, unless there's some sort of weird extenuating circumstances. And that time is my fucking me time. Like, that's journaling, it's reading, it's tending to my copious houseplants, it's maybe it's taking a walk. Sometimes it even looks like doing chores if I know I'm not going to want to do them later and it's going to be better for me to do them in the morning, right? It can look like a lot of different things, but those 3 hours every morning are just for me. They are my self-care space to fill how I need or want them to be filled. Facing the idea of possibly, I don't know yet, having an office space again, this is something I'm really trying to grapple with, because it's been so good for me. Like, there has been, to me, a noticeable improvement in my mental health and well-being for having this dedicated self-care time every day. And so I've been really wrestling. Do I keep that? How do I keep that? Will I need it as much when life looks more normal and isn't so baseline stressful? Right? There's a lot of questions for me about this, right? What actions do I take? What do I let go of? What do I try and hold on to? And as amorphous as that seems, that's what this section is supposed to be about, right? As we're facing the idea of the world shifting again, maybe not, I think a lot of us talked about going back, but in many ways it probably won't be. It may very well not be. There might be some things that are kind of permanent changes, either that you make or that the world around you has made for you, right?
They thrust upon you.
Yeah, right? Like, maybe your employer was like, you know what? Boy, howdy, is it cheaper for us when everybody works from home. Mm-hmm. We don't have to pay for the office space, the maintenance on the office space. Like, woo! All right, cool. Your job is from home forever now, right? Right? So some of these things are not stuff we have direct control or choices over. Some of it is. And I get the impression for myself, and I know Michelle has talked about this too, that as the world kind of opens up, more options are around, our routines can drastically shift. What do we hold on to? What do we let go of? Right? What changes that we made were beneficial to us? What changes that we made were not? My sister doesn't, I don't think, listen to the podcast as often as I'd like her to, but I think she will be fine with my throwing her slightly under the bus. She likes to joke about how many chips she has eaten for the past year. Like, she's just, like, relied on potato chips to get her through the last year. And she's like, I don't know what I'm going to do now, right? Not the healthiest of new changes to occur in her life, right? And, right? There are certainly people who have struggled with more substance abuse. There's all sorts of changes that have happened in any given person's life. So, I think you said this earlier in your thing, Michelle. Now what?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now what? What do I do? What do I not do, right? This is going to be so different for each of you that other than laying out my own little dilemma around self-care and commuting, I can't get much more specific than that, right? It's going to be so dependent on how hard COVID hit your area, what kind of job you did or didn't have when that was going on, right? What the last year has looked like for you. But no matter what, the world's going to be changing again. We're going to have to adapt again, one way or another. And so when Michelle and I were talking about this, that was sort of the fourth category of thing that came up for us is, all right, as the world changes again, how do I adapt? What do I choose to change? What do I choose to hold on to? And so there's three different things. There's three different things for all of them. I probably don't need to say that. So amusingly, the last one I thought of, but the first one I'll mention, is actually mindfulness of emotion. It's going to be really hard to know what decision to make if we're not tuned into ourselves, right? Like, how does this change that I've made make me feel, right? How has it impacted me? And I guess now that I start talking mindfulness of emotion, but honestly, just sort of mindfulness of self, right? Like, how has this impacted me emotionally? How has this impacted me physically? Maybe like what rational or, rationalizations do I have around doing this or not doing this? Kind of really trying to synthesize all of that coming into wise mind, right? But making sure I'm hand gesturing all over the place, which I'm sure is very helpful, as we discussed earlier. How many fingers am I holding up? No, so like just listening to all of you, right? Trying not to, at least in that first pass, give more or less weight to any given part of your experience. Just trying to really figure out your experience, right? How have these things impacted me? And a little bit of trying to figure out how might it impact me to change that, right? Because that can give you kind of a bit of a baseline for making decisions moving forward. Another skill that Michelle and I both thought of when we were thinking about this, and both of us were like,
it's not quite right.
Not quite how it's meant to be used, technically, and not what DBT intended it for, but we still think it's a good idea, which is to use pros and cons, right? Once you've really sort of identified the changes that have been made for you in the past year, you've done some of this like mindfulness so you can figure out how it's impacted you, etc. That gives you a lot of really good data to put into a kind of a pros and cons grid, right? You won't have a really great idea of the pros or cons if you haven't spent that time in that mindfulness, in that sort of wise mind state first. But once you have, you've got this sort of data to be like, okay, for me, I might say, what are the pros of continuing to work from home? And what are the cons of that? Right? And have that be the thing that I ask myself with pros and cons. Generally speaking, pros and cons is used, again, with problem behaviors, right? That's the phrase that DBT likes to use, right? They're used for, do I want to or not want to engage in this problem behavior? I still think more broadly it can be used for kind of anything, any big choice, any big decision, any action that you want to determine whether you take or don't take, right? Whether that be quote unquote problematic or not. So yeah, deep dive into mindfulness and wise mind, maybe taking that data and putting it into a pros or cons. And it might be for several different things, right? My big question is, do I go back to seeing people in an office or not? But I could break that down into smaller ones, right? Maybe your life has changed in so many ways that you need to do 5 different pros and cons because there are 5 really big changes that you have to decide what to do about moving forward. So give yourself space, give yourself time. Don't rush through any of this. You're not going to be well served by trying to knock it out as fast as you can. Once you've kind of gone through all of that, the last thing, and I love this because I hadn't thought about this one, but Michelle put this one in, which was willingness, right? I don't know about you guys. I was not very willing at the beginning of COVID. I did not initially meet the changes happening in my world with very much willingness. I had a whole lot of arm crossing, pouty, I don't want us going on at the beginning of this, right? And so, but that change came kind of out of the left field, right? For me, it felt like about half a moment between, oh, I saw some news article mentioning this virus in China. Huh. And then, boom, you are stuck in your house for a year. I'm like, what the fuck just happened? Right? It just came so fast and so suddenly, so unpredictably. These changes, the world kind of opening back up again, this is one we can see a little bit, right? We have a little bit more forewarning about this. And so trying to, I don't know why I keep thinking about it as sinking into. Maybe it's reaching up to. I don't know. Whatever analogy works for you. Right, this place of willingness. Like, okay, the world is changing again. How can I meet that process from a place of willingness more? Right? How can I adapt from a willing space rather than from a willful, begrudging place for every change that needs to be made, right? How can I just meet the world where it is and be effective as I implement these changes moving forward? It won't be perfect. Willfulness is going to come up anyway. I don't think anybody just moves through the world willing all the time. If you do, I want you to tell me your secret, because I sure as shit don't. But at least trying, at least leaning in the direction of willingness, especially when you notice willfulness sort of on the rise for yourself, right, in any given situation. Well, I don't want it to look like this. Well, I mean, not to sound too callous, but that's nice. Right? You not wanting it to look like that doesn't mean it doesn't look like that, right? So how can you let go of that? How can you shed that a little bit and just come to that place willingly? It's going to really help you with making your decisions and making the impact of those decisions sit better. Especially if they're decisions that, I don't know, in the end are right but hard, right? To be in a willing place is going to just do a lot to ease that. Right? Ease that motion, ease that decision. Not necessarily make it easy, but easier. Man, I don't know about you, Michelle, but just in saying that, I think that a whole lot of DBT is about
Easier.
Nicer, easier.
Better. Yeah.
Right? There's a lot of right? Try not to expect from almost anything a complete something. Mm-hmm. Live in a place of
Yeah.
So any last thoughts on any of those 3 or anything we didn't think of to say there, Michelle?
I really liked where you started with your personal example, because, and I don't know, tell me if I'm getting it right here. I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Yeah.
But what I really liked about your personal example is that even though COVID has brought with it, I mean, unfortunately, so much death on a literal level. So many lives have been lost, and so many people who have gotten COVID and survived have these long-term health effects.
Yeah.
Now and that kind of a thing. I mean, man, it's been a trial. It's been a worldwide trauma that has brought a lot of bad things
and hunger issues and unemployment and housing loss and Jesus, the list goes on.
Right. And it's also kind of this dialectic of, I can say for myself and almost everyone that I've interacted with, they've been able to name at least one, like, positive, good thing that they've gotten out of this past year. I hear it over and over again. I got more time with my kids. Like, people saying that all the time to me. That kind of a thing. So I loved that you were speaking about one of the positive things that you've gotten out of it. And then also when you're trying to determine what do you keep, right? It was this beautiful example of, like, maybe it's not even so much about, do I get an office space or do I keep working from home, but how do I keep this me time? How do I do that? That's the thing I really want to keep. So, what does that mean and what does that look like? And how, if I am going to get another office, how do I make sure that maybe I don't have as long of a commute? So I just think you spoke really nicely to, I gave a good example that other people can apply to themselves of what was something beneficial and positive that you've gotten out of the last year. And how can you try to hold on to that when you're making decisions moving forward about what your life looks like?
Yeah, kind of as you make the decisions about moving forward, as the changes unravel before you, what do you and how can you hold on to the good?
Yeah, and as you said too, right? Some of those changes we may be very much in control of. Some of those changes we may not be in control of. And I was thinking too, it also may be something where it's really important, and this is why you mentioning the mindfulness of emotions is just spot on here, is because there may also be some grief. Like, even if it's like, I want to keep this thing from COVID, right? Like, you and I have talked about this. We don't know if and when we're going to podcast together in the same room again. There's so many benefits to doing it this way.
Decently far away from each other.
Decently far away, right? And yet, I have grief around that too. So even if I'm like, yes, we decide that this is the best decision moving forward is to, we've done far more episodes virtually than in person. This is the best decision, if we were to each do pros and cons and come to this conclusion, we can feel good about that decision and still have grief. And so if that's something that's coming up as well for people as they determine what they want to keep, it's like, ooh, I do really like this thing, but I kind of miss how it was too. Totally natural, totally normal. So I really like that piece too, about just being mindful of all of the emotions that we may feel as we make these decisions about what lasting changes might we keep moving forward into the world now. Yeah.
That's
a lot of stuff. Yeah. So for homework, you all are probably used to this now. I feel like this is what it's been the last few monthly episodes, so this might come as no surprise. So we named 4 different topics today, right? I will just briefly recap them. Feeling anxious about socializing with other people or just feeling out of practice with it. Feeling scared to re-enter the world and start going to places again that you once went to. Figuring out what your boundaries are with other people and how to communicate those. And determining and making decisions about what you want to keep from COVID moving forward. What benefits you got that you want to hold on to. So, out of those 4, what we're going to encourage you to do is to pick one that feels like the biggest struggle for you. And then out of that, pick one out of the 3 skills. I will say, though, maybe with what we talked about today, I don't know if you'll agree or not, Kate, but some of them really kind of all go together. Like the being scared to re-enter the world. They all kind of go together, right? Cope ahead and opposite action and effective rethinking. So maybe picking, one or more if it kind of comes up organically and naturally. But pick one of these areas to focus on and to recognize, ooh, that's something that I want to spend some time thinking about for myself as these changes are happening around us. So that's the homework. And yeah, moving into awkward self-promotion, we have some people to shout out. Awkward self-promotion time. We have some people to shout out who recently became patrons. So we are shouting out Candace and we are shouting out Jake. So thank you both
Candace
of you.
and Jake.
Yes, thank you for becoming patrons. And if you want to become a patron, you can go to patreon.com/dbtme if you want to get a shout out like they did. Also checking out our Etsy shop. So going to Etsy and searching for DBT and me. We wanted to mention today, we've posted about it in the Facebook group, but since our last monthly episode, we uploaded something on there that you all might be interested in. So we talked, this was quite a few months ago now that we launched our second podcast, The Couch and the Chair. Once we realized we were running out of DBT skills, and we're like, we want to keep podcasting, but how? We wanted to podcast more than once a month. Obviously we're still doing DBT and me. That's why you all are here. But we also launched a second podcast called The Couch and the Chair. And we developed our top 20 therapy tips guide. I think it's just called Kate and Michelle's Therapy Tips Guide. But one of the things that we wanted to put together in honor of that podcast was a PDF. And Kate listed her top 10 therapy tips. I listed my top 10. Essentially, these are the things that we catch ourselves telling our clients all the time. These are kind of our best bits of wisdom that we share with our clients. So we compiled 20 of them together in a PDF guide. I think it's something like 33-ish pages. And if you're like, what are those tips? I want to know what those tips are. We hope that something in there could be helpful for you. And that's up for sale on our Etsy shop. So if you go to Etsy and search for DBT and me, you'll find the PDF guide that just says Kate and Michelle's Therapy Tips Guide. And that's for sale there if you want to purchase and download that to read at your leisure. It's like I don't know. Maybe ebook is too much of a stretch, but it's something that we hope will be helpful for all of you. Checking out our Etsy shop and then rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts if you feel so inclined to do so, if that's where you listen. And last but not least, send us emails if you have questions or things to say at dbtandmepodcast@gmail.com. I think I got all the stuff.
I think you did.
Okay. Cool.
Okay.
Excuse me. I'm having a little bit of a burping moment, but I think I'm ready for you to move into closing moment, Kate. Okay. I'm ready.
Get all our throat clearing out of the way.
Yes.
I should do my last little shift in this squeaky ass chair, so I don't do that in the middle of the closing moment. Crack my back. Okay. Okay. So, as per usual, start by just going ahead and getting comfortable. Whatever that means for you right here and now. Sitting, standing, laying down, walking. Whatever feels good. Whatever's accessible. And if you are safe and feel comfortable doing so, you can go ahead and close your eyes. As always, we're going to begin by just noticing our breath. You don't have to breathe any more slowly or any more deeply than you do naturally. It's just about paying attention. It's about tuning in to the sensations and the rhythms of our breath and letting them welcome us into our bodies and into the present moment. So today, we're going to spend some time in mindfulness of emotions, in some dialectics, probably. As Michelle was mentioning at the end there, we can have complicated feelings about things as the world shifts and changes again. We can be anticipating something with joy and terror at the same time. We can have joy and grief about the same exact idea or action. So for today's closing moment, I'm just going to bring up some scenarios, some things that you might be thinking about or looking forward to doing again when the world opens back up. And for each idea, I'm just going to pause for a couple of moments afterwards and let you just notice what feelings come up without judgment, right? Without any, this is good, this is bad, this is right, this is wrong. Just notice, pay attention, and really validate yourself, whatever and however you might feel. So the first scenario I'll mention today is just getting together with a group of family or friends at their home or apartment to take a moment to just notice the feelings that live in that thought. Next, I'm going to have you think about going out to eat at a restaurant, by yourself or with others. And what feelings come up when you picture yourself doing that? Next, just have you imagine if there's someone in your life who's been at high risk for the last year and who you haven't been able to touch or hug. Just imagine wrapping your arms around them and giving them a big hug. Noticing the feelings that live there. Next, I'd like you to imagine either re-entering the workforce or going back to working at a workplace rather than from home, whichever one is applicable to you. And how you might feel in that circumstance. And after that, take a moment to think about the possibility of traveling, whether that be a car trip or a flight or going all the way to a foreign country. Again, whatever seems most applicable to you. Taking the time to picture doing that and how that might feel. After that, imagine going to a public place, like a mall or a grocery store, a retail shop, and having no one wearing masks anymore. And what feelings come up for you with that thought, with that possibility. Obviously, there's so many more examples of situations or possibilities than I've come up with now. So for this last one, I invite you to just bring to mind something that's relevant and personal to you that I may not have mentioned. Whatever that thing or situation is. Just bringing it to mind and letting yourself notice what you feel, what you think. and what comes up for you there. And when you're done there, go ahead and tuck your imagination away again and come back into your body. You might do this by rolling your neck, your shoulders, or wrists, or ankles, or maybe by taking a couple of slow, deep breaths. And when you've done that and you feel ready, you can go ahead and open your eyes. Thanks so much, everyone. Catch you next month.
Thanks, everybody.
To learn more about us and the DBT skills